So many have asked me about receiving the Holy Ghost with a manifestation of other tongues. I'm going to give you a little bit of my testimony. When I was in my office one morning about 3 a.m. after a 3-day drunk, I got saved. Later that morning, about 10 a.m., the man that was going to be my pastor in the future came up to the office with another man who had witnessed to me. And the man had asked me if I was saved. And I said, no, I was going straight to hell. I didn't know anything about the Bible. Anyway, they said, well, look, I want to pray for you. And I was sitting on a pool table. And when he started to pray for me, I heard my name and I heard the name Jesus. When I heard the name Jesus, it's like somebody hit me in the back of the head and knocked me to the floor. And I felt this fire racing up and down in my body. And it, like, I could hear it at first. It was like a welder's torch pop, and it just took off. And it was just burning the dross out of me. Well, down on the floor, this is an ice cold room because it's air conditioned really well. I was sweating from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. So it really did its work. And I did not speak in tongues. Well, later, as I'm going on, I'm going to say about a month, I asked the pastor, I said, do you believe I got the Holy Ghost? Because I've never spoken in other tongues. And he said, yes, I believe you do. And he based that on the things that I was doing. And I said, okay, well, that gave me an assurance. Here's what he said next. But you can speak in other tongues. I went, okay. If I'm really baptized in the Holy Ghost, I can speak in other tongues. So I decided, well, I haven't been able to speak in tongues. And I went to this meeting and probably, 250 people there. It was a small church. It was packed out. And the guy that was ministering, his name was Buck. And Buck had memorized much of the New Testament because God had given him the supernatural ability to be able to remember everything. And I was going, wow, this is amazing. And he was doing Timothy. Well, prior to that time, I decided what I was going to do. I was going to pray and fast to know God better and that I could speak in other tongues. That was my request from God, to God. And as I got about 3 days into that fast, we went to that meeting. Suddenly, in the middle of the message, Buck stops, walks out to the front, and he says, there is someone who's praying and fasting to know God better. And as soon as he said that, the power of God hit me and knocked me to the floor off of my pew, just like he'd knocked me off of that pool table. And I started crying, and all of a sudden I heard the voice of God. It was audible. He said, open your mouth now. I'm going to show you something. So I opened my mouth, and when I did, he filled me up, and I started speaking in tongues. It was a really staccato-like language. And the power of God just went out to the whole church, and everybody just flooded the altars. Well, there I am. I'm still crying and speaking in tongues. I don't know what all they're doing, but obviously it was so much power behind it that nothing had to be in English at that moment. So Buck started ministering to all the people, and I was still speaking in tongues and crying. So my children looked over at my wife. He said, what's the matter with Daddy? And she looked at him and said, honey, he's just so happy. And I was so happy. Well, that's my story. There are times when maybe I am having some conflict, whatever's going on, and what I will do is I'll begin to stir up the gift of God that's within me. It's like pulling up water out of a well. You drop the bucket in, you pull it up. What is the thing that causes me to be able to do it? My tongue. So I open my mouth and get my tongue going, and I start speaking in tongues, and I build myself up in the most holy faith. I can do it at will, and the power of God falls all over me. Will you feel the Holy Ghost? Look, I did. It gets all over me when I speak in tongues, and I'm just ecstatic. Well, you will too. On the day of Pentecost, it came like a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house with tongues of fire, and they all began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. So as you're praying for the baptism of the Holy Ghost with the ability to be able to speak in other tongues, just know He gives the utterance. You have to do the talking. Open your mouth and begin to speak, because He will fill you up. If you hunger and thirst after righteousness, you shall be filled. And I hope that little testimony helped some of y'all. And I think maybe a lot of you probably already got the baptism of the Holy Ghost. You just hadn't spoken in tongues, but you can. God bless you guys, and go in peace. Love you. Bye.